Starting this weekend, President Trump's social media posts are up for sale, and Democratic lawmakers are warning that this could lead to corruption. Trump's media and technology group rolled out a new service yesterday, giving traders and investors who pay up to $100,000 a month early access to Trump's posts. Now, in a letter to the SEC, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Adam Schiff write, quote, "This appears to be an outrageous abuse of the president's office for his personal benefit that undermines everyday investors and the integrity of our markets while enriching Wall Street and other wealthy insiders." So let's talk about this a little bit more. Joining me right now is Michael Feinberg, MS Now National Security and Intelligence Analyst and former Assistant Special Agent in charge with the FBI. Michael, good to see you. Truth Media's interim CEO says markets already move on Truth Social posts. Democratic lawmakers noting in their letter to the SEC, Planeteer's stock jumped immediately after Trump endorsed it on Truth Social. They noted Coinbase stock also soared after Trump urged banks to support the crypto industry. On the same day, he actually met with Coinbase's CEO. So the White House says, of course, the president has nothing to do with his stock dealings. But if anyone else in any other leadership position tried to sell posts, wouldn't they be investigated for something like that?
Yeah, it's really difficult to frame what's happening as anything other than overt corruption. A lot of stock market and related trades these days that are events driven are made in microseconds. And what the president is essentially doing is saying, if you are willing to give my private businesses money, we will make sure that you have first crack at investments and trades based on my policy decisions. That is normally the sort of thing that gets prosecuted as explicit corruption. And there's another concern too, which is that foreign nationals and foreign governments are allowed to trade in American stocks and American securities. And if they're willing to pony up money, our adversaries can actually benefit from the president taking money from them in order to make money. It's corruption all the way down.
So to that point, if this were challenged in court, how difficult would it be to prove the sort of cause and effect of having early access to those posts?
I don't think it would be very difficult, but it largely would depend on the ability of regulatory agencies to mark the exact moment at when somebody who gave money to Truth Social was able to make a trade versus somebody who did not make that payment. And the problem is the regulatory agencies all fall under the executive branch. So I think it highly unlikely that evidence will be proffered by them or that the president's Justice Department, particularly while it's being run by his personal attorney, would be inclined at all to file charges based on such a trade.
Michael, let's talk about the stunning reversal by U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C., Jeanine Pirro, who dropped charges against the former Olympian accused of vandalizing the reflecting pool. Remember, she claimed her office had evidence that could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was the vandal. Now, she's saying the Interior Department exaggerated those claims. It was a botched job by the contractor. Isn't it the prosecutor's job to really just ensure that, the evidence is solid before you bring felony charges against somebody?
Yeah, it's quite more than that. I spent almost 2 decades at the FBI, and before that, I was a prosecutor. And if at any point in my investigative career, I had brought a case to an assistant U.S. attorney or a U.S. attorney and said, I think we've got a good one here, but all the evidence is not in yet, they would look at me like I was insane suggesting that we file charges until we had seen all that evidence. So the fact that they didn't gather all the necessary documentation and administrivia from the Department of Interior before deciding to go before a grand jury is a shocking lapse in their basic obligations as public servants and as officers of the court. I think in any normal times, prosecutors who did that who sought to deprive an American citizen of his freedom before knowing all the facts on the ground would normally be subject to sanctions or disbarment. And I sincerely hope that David Hearn's attorneys are thinking of those options.
And we talked about that earlier with Kayla Gardner. What's interesting, well, maybe not so much interesting, almost predictable, Donald Trump is doubling down on the idea this was vandalism. So is Interior Secretary Doug Burgum. And you called it, this shocking lapse. So what could be behind the disconnect here?
The simple fact that Donald Trump and apparently Doug Burnham as well, because they're not having to sign their names to court filings and frankly, because of their inherent characters, don't feel themselves bound by facts and reality. Jeanine Pirro actually has to attest to the court in her office's pleadings that she's telling the truth. And there are real consequences, as other U.S. attorneys have found, if you lie or mislead the court. And Donald Trump doesn't face those sort of penalties, whereas Jeanine Pirro could very well find herself out of a job or unable to win other cases. So there's a way of looking at this, at least, in which Donald Trump, knowing he can say whatever he wants without consequence, is fundamentally throwing his chosen U.S. attorney under a political bus because he knows she can't actually push back against him because he's her boss, but he also knows that she can't lie to the court. So while I have little sympathy for her for a lot of reasons, she's really in an untenable position.
Let's talk about Trump's former personal attorney. The Senate Judiciary Committee is set to meet Tuesday to consider Todd Blanche's attorney general nomination after Trump suggested he'll re-up the anti-weaponization fund if there is further delay in his confirmation. But the question is, what sort of position does this put Blanche in? Because remember, he testified in Congress that this fund was dead.
Look, I think Blanche's whole time as Deputy Attorney General has undone any goodwill and reputation he made for himself when he was a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. It looks like he is either not telling the truth to the Senate, or it looks like he doesn't know what the president is actually thinking or wants him to do. Neither one is a good look for him. But like I said, in taking on politicized prosecutions like Jim Comey, Letitia James, Don Lemon, the Broadview Six in Illinois, and countless peaceful protesters and American citizens around the country, or through the fact that many of his offices are not able to obtain indictments for the first time, or through the fact that he embarked on this ridiculous settlement in the first place. Like, his reputational damage has already occurred. I don't know that it could get worse just because at a certain point there is a bottom, but it's certainly not causing him to gain allies.
Well said. Michael Feinberg, thank you for your time today and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.